Generals, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's a real pleasure being back here and being back in India. When I was on Royal College of Defence Studies in 2017, I was lucky enough to go on the international tour that came to India, and very well looked after we were as well. 6th Division was also delighted to host the Indian Army on a visit last year to Uphaven in 2019. We've been asked to comment on the salience of information manoeuvre in multi-domain operations. I will explain who the 6th Division are and our role in information warfare before I lay out the UK's doctrinal context and the relevance of multi-domain operations and information warfare before handing over to Colonel John Kendall, who is one of our Deputy Brigade Commanders, who will talk about how we are bringing these concepts to life. Firstly, a quick run-through of structures. The 6th Division is the British Army's Unconventional Operations Division. It was first formed by Arthur Wellesley, the 1st Duke of Wellington, for service in the Peninsular War as part of the Anglo-Portuguese Army. It also fought in both World Wars. It was reformed briefly from 2008 to 2011 for deployment to Afghanistan, where the General Officer Commanding was our now Chief of Defence Staff, General Sir Nick Carter. And it was permanently reformed in August 2019, last year, to become the Army's Information Manoeuvre Division. So, as you can see, we're a pretty young division. The division has 5 subordinate brigades. The Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance Brigade, which holds all land ISR assets and integrates them with all defence, UK government and allied ISR for worldwide operations. It has 77 Brigade. This is our influence formation that conducts information activity and outreach across the Army and across wider defence. It has the Specialised Infantry Group, which is developing to conduct unconventional operations below the threshold of armed conflict, to compete in the grey zone and to counter violent extremist organisations. Our executive arm, if you will. And finally, we have 11 and 1 Signal Brigade, who protect and exploit our information environment, ensuring effective communications and developing offensive and defensive cyber capabilities. The division is persistently engaged worldwide and also retains the contingent capability to integrate with the UK's High Readiness Force for any eventuality, from disaster relief to war fighting. Multi-domain operations are not a new construct, but the increasing number of domains, the ability to conduct cross-domain effect, and the proliferation of technology and communications have created radical changes that both provide threats and opportunities. Single-service stovepipes are no longer just bad practice, either for the military or in the round, and they're a major inhibitor to self-development. They are open invitations as well to our adversaries. Space is now a near essential navigation and surveillance asset that we can expect to be contested. For example, high-powered lasers, attack satellites of debris clouds, or unsophisticated raids on ground stations. The cyber and human domains brings a new dimension to conflict, not only the ability to conduct sabotage and subversion, but also to weaponize social media and cultural engagement. This is critical to information warfare. Our adversaries know that they have to prevent us getting a foothold, because once we do, we can create an unstoppable momentum. They have to fix us as a military force, because when we can maneuver, we will win. They also know they must fracture our synchronization to break apart our cohesion between domains, and also within our home nation to undermine support for any war or operation we're in. Multi-domain operations seeks to address this challenge by seamlessly and concurrently integrating effects across multiple domains to create multiple dilemmas for our adversaries. Multiple domain operations creates the opportunity to overwhelm an adversary by acting faster, deceiving and disrupting, and dominating the narrative. This is a competitive environment, and there will only be short windows of advantage. This means we must break out of our stovepipes and properly network sensors and also effectors. This also relies on maintaining an information advantage over our adversaries. Hard power remains vital, but the ability to use the information domain to disrupt, attack the homeland, undermine social cohesion makes information warfare an even more vital facet of constant competition and indeed warfare. This is not a uniquely British view. It is shared by the US and can be obviously seen in Russia's Primakov doctrine and Gerasimov's theory and practice of future war. Information warfare is nested in the UK's national and military doctrine. The Army's underpinning doctrine of integrated action identifies audiences, actions and adversaries, and then seeks to find and exploit opportunities against them. There are three key aspects to information warfare, which are joint action, a Ministry of Defence joint doctrinal concept that orchestrates military capabilities and activities, both kinetic and non-kinetic, to affect an actor's understanding and capability and the cohesion between them to achieve influence and output. We then have information superiority, which seeks to gain competitive advantage through the continuous, directed and adaptive employment of relevant information, principles, capabilities and behaviours. And this results in information advantage, which is the credible benefit gained through the continuous, adaptive, decisive and resilient employment of information and information systems. Information warfare is not only offensive, it must also defend our narrative from the tip of the spear to the homes of our citizens. Further, we must collect, analyse and exploit both the information environment and our own data whilst protecting it from our enemies. To do that, the Army and 60th have created the concept of information manoeuvre. At its heart, information manoeuvre is about fusing and synchronizing multiple information-centric capabilities in one division using the power of integration, combinations under a unified command, one command, and these capabilities are drawn principally from the ISR Brigade, Influence Specialists in 77 Brigade, and the ability to protect and exploit our own data given in our two signals brigades. It is a joint and combined endeavour that leverages all UK levers and, where relevant, those of our allies. Information manoeuvre delivers improved understanding, enhanced methods of communication, more nuanced and innovative ways to influence target audiences, and protects our people, equipment, infrastructure and data. Information manoeuvre allows the UK to generate options for the UK to mitigate risk and seize opportunities in this era of constant competition. I will now hand over to Colonel John Kendall, who will explain how we're translating this into practice. Some of what you will hear will be subject to cutting-edge experimentation and prototyping on operations. This is a fast-moving divisional methodology that is well suited to the fast-changing environment. We will both be keen to gather your thoughts in plenary or in private afterwards. John.
Really, thank you. Generals, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure to return for what's my third engagement with Claws and my fifth time in India, and I feel welcome and delighted to be back. I'll now look at how we operationalise these concepts in the 6th United Kingdom Division. So hard power still remains vital. It's an instrument of military power that sits with the rest of our national instruments. But information warfare is embedded in everything we do. We engage and constrain our adversaries, their freedom to operate, and we seek to prevent wider conflict. But the pervasiveness of the information environment means that even in warfighting, it remains a critical component in retaining legitimacy and narrative dominance. The slide you see here shows just 12 illustrative effects used by information manoeuvre. We seek to find and fix our adversaries, both physically and cognitively, based on a thorough and culturally attuned understanding of the human terrain. This ensures that when we communicate and we conduct outreach, it's effective, not just in working with neutral groups and our host nations, but also in undermining and discrediting our adversaries. Now, activity may be virtual through IT systems and communications networks. It can be directly cognitive, but it's also physical. After all, killing someone is still a pretty authoritative message. Concurrently, we need to protect ourselves, our information networks, and those potentially of our allies. And this all builds being able to frustrate the enemy, to disorientate their command and control systems, and deceive their commanders by presenting them with multiple dilemmas and helping them to make the decisions that we want them to. Because a wrong-footed enemy is a vulnerable enemy. These effects are used to conduct unconventional operations against state adversaries, against violent extremist organisations when we are below the threshold of war. As we switch into conflict and war fighting, we translate those to support the UK's high readiness formations. So below the threshold of war. In the contact layer, or the grey zone, we seek to prevent our adversaries from dominating the perceptual landscape, and we prevent them from gaining operational surprise. We do this through persistently engaging worldwide, both physically and through cyberspace, through collecting intelligence and challenging their incremental gains in the physical, virtual and cognitive spaces. We seek to understand the enemy's commanders' intentions at the strategic, operational and tactical level. We seek to understand their threats they could present, but also by knowing their strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities they lay out for us to take advantage. We will attribute and expose their propaganda activities and their covert operations. And we'll gain technical intelligence to build our battle picture further. We will then shape the environment through offensive information operations. This is more than just getting our narrative across. It is about getting after key high-value targets in the enemy's command against their principles and shattering the coherence of their conversations. We can enhance that through cyber and electronic warfare means. But we'll also work with host nations to advise, assist and accompany them on operations. Now that does more than just extend our reach, because what that does is it builds the sophistication of our sense and warn system. Because we fully recognise, and possibly some bitter lessons over the last 20 years for us, that we do not have an exceptional understanding of the world. We must work with partners and other nations to do that. And that allows us to deny our adversary the opportunity to seize ground. We can foster partnerships, and we can frustrate the enemy's propaganda narrative. So information operations are critical because it's no good just winning the physical battle now. We have to win the narrative too. This is an example order of battle for unconventional operations. And the Brigadier mentioned that this is all very new and experimental. We rewrote this slide on Monday, so our experimentation is happening at pace. Every task is different, so every team we deploy will be different. An unconventional warfare team may be as few as 12 people or as large as 200. Before we deploy, we will harness all government intelligence, surveillance and collection assets, from space assets and surveillance through to cultural awareness that might come from a different government department. Our Department for International Development, for example, will often have people on the ground before we do. And therefore, we will seek to bring that through into our intelligence picture. We'll expose the adversary's activity and counter his propaganda. Now, that may include gaining physical access or virtual access to their systems in their home base or in the area that is contested. We'll exploit the technical information on their weapon effects, explosives and other materials. We can, of course, attribute where a rocket is fired from. If you give us a shell hole, we can give you the angle and the range of the shell round. But equally, as was alluded to, if you tell us where you think a cyber attack came from, we can track to where it really did come from. Reconnaissance troops remain essential, and they can physically identify the key human, economic, and physical terrain. They can conduct military capacity building, and they can partner, and this extends the UK's reach. Depending on the specific operation, we can get the right people into that team. And that can range from cultural property protection teams through to critical national infrastructure advisors, looking at power, hydroelectric, water supplies, fuel, through to cyber protection. Because we recognise that our opponent seeks to put multiple dilemmas upon us. And if either our nation or the nations we're working with cannot supply fuel, or their computer systems don't work and their economy starts tanking, their armies will not be allowed to fight. They'll be trucking water around or trucking oil around. So we have to preserve our freedoms of operation. Breaking from constant competition in the grey zone and moving above the threshold of conflict into warfighting, we would expect to deploy the Divisional Information Manoeuvre Group, or DIMG. The DIMG delivers standoff decision advantage for the commander. It uses counter-threat to look at how the opponent is gathering their intelligence on us. It uses cyber and electromagnetic activity. It uses influence operations, networks, and multi-domain intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance. And this is enhanced by reach back deep into the UK. That reach back might not be to a military person. We have specialist reserve officers who've never done a fitness test in their life. They have never picked up a rifle in their life. And when they put a uniform on, they look pretty shabby. But my goodness me, what they will know about the specifics of some deep specialist areas is incredible. One of our cyber experts is the director of a German company for railway cyber security. He's a white hat hacker. So if we're looking at an inroad into a theatre and we want to know how the enemy will attack the rail infrastructure, we've got the man. Now, the Divisional Information Manoeuvre Group operates as part of the Fighting Divisional Headquarters, with its staff integrated across all of the branches of the divisional headquarters. It has a one-star commander, and the commander of the DIMG is assisted by 100 staff. It's a large staff because of the scale of what we do. We have 2,000 deployed information manoeuvre personnel within the division. And that ranges from forward patrols and dug-in observation systems that we would all recognise, through to academics and people who are specialists in cultures. Now, this is new, but it reaches beyond the Army's route to leverage all multi-domain assets to gain battle-winning advantage. And we've tested it. On the series of US warfighter exercises through 2017 to 2019, we've deployed against a free-thinking enemy and demonstrated the ability to give the corps commander a disruptive edge by harnessing all information capabilities. And we've learned some more lessons. For us, the information battle starts in phase 0. You cannot rock up in a country and then learn. You have to start learning years, weeks, months beforehand. Information manoeuvre does not just support the commander or the fighting element, sometimes it is supported by it, classically in deception. You cannot do deception without resourcing it properly, and therefore sometimes that can become the main effort of a force. Good old traditional electronic warfare is still a battle winner. Because cyber is great, but you cannot cyber a T-90. And if you cyber people, they'll just switch to military radios, so you must have a degree of both. Possibly the most important one for us is to be competitive. All of this must be done at the speed of relevance. So information manoeuvre and warfighting tends to focus on denying the enemy the information environment. But we always leave a little bit open. We let them communicate because we want to use their communications so we can feed them multiple dilemmas. And if I can break into their system, I'd much rather leave them a false intelligence report on the system than shut it down. I'd much rather take the fantastic videos of their commanders giving patriotic messages, and I'd like to deep fake them, something we wouldn't do in peacetime, but we would in war. Deep fake them to announcing their surrender or their withdrawal. So, in conclusion, the UK believes that information warfare is an increasingly critical aspect of multi-domain operations, that our doctrine of information manoeuvre implemented through the unconventional warfare groups and the divisional information manoeuvre group provides a significant advantage against all types of enemies. Generals, distinguished guests, thank you.